Welcome, folks. My name is Gwen Martin. I'm a patrol sergeant with the Cottage Grove Police Department. I've been with the department since 2000. And one of my jobs has been to monitor the predatory offenders in this city, make sure they stay compliant with the registration requirements, and so that's kind of why I'm standing up in front of you tonight. We have a series of presenters. Sarah Hustad from Department of Corrections is going to answer any and all your questions. No, just kidding. There's several of us here who will try and answer all your questions tonight. We know you came here with a lot of questions. And if you had a chance to write a question down on a piece of paper and drop it in the orange bowl, great. Otherwise, we'll have some paper and some pens. So as the evening progresses, if you have a question, write it down. We've found that having the questions written down works better than people all trying to stand up and say, ooh, me, take my question first. So what we'll do about the first presentation will take 35, 45 minutes. So at 6:45, we'll start collecting the questions. There are several uniformed officers here. We'll come around, we'll grab your questions. Some of them will be duplicate questions, some of them will be similar. We will try to get through all of them. And we will have a 30-minute question and answer period. If we don't get to your question, if you've got something else comes up, some of us will be here after the 7:30 time when we'll end the meeting to answer your question. Plus, my business card is on the table out there. Email's on there, phone on there. Leave me a voicemail, send me an email. I'll get back to you and try and answer your question as best I can. Okay? That's how we're going to run the question and answer period after the presentations tonight. So, I want to emphasize that public safety is our #1 priority. And the purpose of this meeting tonight is not to cause fear or instill fear and say, oh my goodness, look at this. We're here to educate. We're here to inform. There are offenders throughout our community, throughout our state. They're in the grocery store. They're in your dentist's office. And we want to make it clear to you that we're fulfilling our requirement to do a community notification when a level 3 registrant comes into our community. And Sarah will talk about the risk levels and what that means, okay? But basically what happens is we got the call from this individual on the 22nd of January that he was going to be staying in our community for some time. And within 5 minutes of getting that call, my mind is already forming this community notification meeting. Okay? So we got things going. We started meeting with people. We met with the schools, nice enough to let us use this facility. And we met with Department of Corrections and BCA. We have a representative from a county attorney here. And so we will be able to hopefully answer all your questions and before the night is over.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Hustad. I'm the Community Notification Coordinator for the Department of Corrections. I travel all over the state helping law enforcement facilitate these types of meetings. I am so appreciative of your presence here tonight. Thank you for being here. I imagine you all had things you'd much rather be doing tonight than coming to hear the message that a level 3 has come to Cottage Grove. It's so important to be able to be here in person and get the information firsthand rather than drawing your own conclusions based on what you may have heard, read, seen online. I really appreciate you being here. It's normal to have all kinds of feelings come up when you hear this news. Whatever they may be, they're valid. Feelings of fear, feelings of anger, distress, perhaps victimization issues that from the past are coming up for you. And if you are someone who's been victimized by sexual violence, my heart goes out to you. I really, really applaud your strength. The strength that helped you get out the door and into this room tonight. Thank you so much for being here. So you got these feelings, they're swirling around. Where do you go? At some point, the thought starts to creep into the feelings. Okay, I know this person is here. I know I can't do anything about that situation. What can I do? What can I do for myself? What can I do for my loved ones, my family, my neighbors, my community? How can I use this information in a meaningful way for myself and for everyone else that matters? That's why your Cottage Grove Police Department is having this meeting tonight, to provide you with information, good information. So let's get started. I'm going to be talking about registration, registered people in the community, in Washington County, in Cottage Grove, surrounding communities. Talking about community notification laws, how they came about, the risk level assignment, specific information about the level 3 individual, going over some resources, and if you came in past that table, there's a great sheet of online resources I highly recommend. If you don't pick anything else up off that table tonight, pick up that, take some time, go on the internet and look up some of those resources. Particularly if you're a parent or someone who's a caregiver for children. There's great safety planning information on both the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center online source and the Stop It Now website. And then we'll get to the questions. And as Sergeant Martin said, we're going to take a break about 6:45 and pick up your questions. So people required to register with registerable offenses, they've always lived in our communities. And they always will. That's the reality of our lives. It's likely there's at least one interacting somehow, working, living, etc., in every community in our great state. We don't know who they are necessarily. We're only allowed to know about certain specific individuals, those that have been deemed to be the higher risk level. So there are people out there that law enforcement is aware of, but whose information is not public. So you don't know who they are. It's better to think generally in terms of safety, in terms of prevention. What can I do generally? Learning the characteristics and behaviors of someone who's at risk is key. Not focusing on the known offender. So registration laws came about, like a lot of laws come about. There's a tragic, horrific incident, the Jacob Wetterling abduction. When the Wetterling family worked with law enforcement and discovered that law enforcement did not have a way to track these individuals. And so registration laws were drawn up and created to create this net so that there would be a database of registered individuals. It's administered by our Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. That's our state police agency. Someone who's required to register has to register any addresses they have, where they might be employed, if they are employed, any vehicles that they have. If they're going to school, that needs to be registered. And anytime there's a change in any of that information, it needs to be registered. And if it's not, it's a felony offense in Minnesota. So there are particular crimes that require registration. These are any criminal sexual conduct involving minors, including possession of child pornography, and kidnapping and false imprisonment. Now, initially, the registration laws were created for sex offenders and sex offenders only, and then they widened that net. They expanded the law to include registration required for false imprisonment and kidnapping with no sexual intent. So they couldn't call it, it was called the sex offender registration law then, but they couldn't call it the kidnappers, false imprisonment, or sex offender law. So they had to come up with a new term. And that's where the term predatory offender came from, to encompass the entire group of people required to register, not just sex offenders, but most of them are sex offenders. So as of January 1st of this year, There are 17,644 people in Minnesota required to register their information with law enforcement. That's why I say you can be reasonably assured that there's at least one in every community in our state. I did a little snapshot. As of February 5th, there are 267 people required to register in Washington County, 43 in Cottage Grove. Ramsey County and Hennepin County, I put up there other counties just to show a little comparison. Of course, Hennepin County is going to have the most because it's the most populated county in our state. Community notification laws were established in 1997, and they apply to people who are required to register who are being released from secure confinement. That could be prison in Minnesota or outside of Minnesota, it could be military prison, or it could be a Department of Human Services facility. And what community notification laws require is that Minnesota Department of Corrections assesses and assigns risk levels to people before they're released. It does not apply to people with a juvenile offense only. You have to have an adult sentence. And it doesn't apply to people who have received probation. You have to have gone to prison or some type of secure confinement, not jail, prison, in order to be eligible to have a risk level assigned to you. So the law has two main elements. The Department of Corrections, my employer, is responsible for assessing risk and assigning the risk level. Law enforcement, on the other hand, is responsible for any notification required. They determine the scope and breadth of notification based on the risk level. So the risk levels exist to provide law enforcement with a level of communication that they can then provide to communities. There are three risk levels. Level 1 represents the lowest risk level. And the level of notification that law enforcement can do on a level 1 is fairly limited. They can do notification to other law enforcement agencies, to victims or witnesses that have requested notification, and there's a formal process for requesting notification. You can go through the Department of Corrections to request that, and to adult members of that person's immediate household. Then level 2 is a moderate risk level. So in addition to the types of notification that law enforcement can do on a level 1, they can also do notification to organizations, individuals that may meet the victim profile of that particular person. So law enforcement is looking at them on a more case-by-case basis, saying, okay, who needs to be notified of this person? Level 3's the higher risk level opens it up to broad public dissemination of information, and law enforcement can do notification in a myriad of ways. One thing absolutely needs to be done, which they did immediately, was authorize the Department of Corrections to put the person's information on the Department of Corrections website. And I'm sure a lot of you have already gone to the website and looked at the information. They can also do all these other things, which they've done pretty much every one of those other methods of notification in this instance. So currently, Department of Corrections, percentage of risk levels that we have, 56% of people are level 1s, 29% are level 2s, and level 3s, the risk level that gets the most attention, represents the smallest percentage of risk levels at 15%. Interestingly, level 3s overall, of all known offenders required to register, are 2% of them.
Can I just ask for clarification on something? The risk of what? Is it just risk of recommitting, reoffending, or what?
Yes. Risk of reoffending. So as of February 5th, there are 380 level 3s on that website living in Minnesota communities. Most of these people have no prior convictions. They have not registered before. They're not reoffenders. So a sentencing guidelines study done in 2015 found 7% had no prior convictions of criminal sexual conduct convictions. 93%, excuse me, I said that wrong. Erase, erase. 93% had no prior convictions. 7% had prior convictions. So fairly low amount. So the Department of Corrections uses something called evidence-based practices or best practices, meaning we do research to inform us what works best in offender management. Our study that we did, looking at reconviction from 1990 to 2002, in the beginning, the reconviction rate, recidivism rate, was a little over 16%. It's gone down considerably since then, over the years. And at the end of this particular study, it was 2.5%. So over the whole study, if you look at it, general was 10%, looking at the whole one. At the end, 2.5. So what do we attribute this decline in recidivism to? Improved practices based on research. We didn't have a lot of measures in place in the beginning. We didn't have registration in 1990. It started in 1991. We didn't have intensive supervised release programs, and this is a very strict supervision that certain offenders are subject to. That started between 1990 and 91. We didn't have community notification in the beginning. That started in 97. We've improved our treatment practices. We also have stricter sentencing. A follow-up study was done in 2012, and the result of that was the reconviction rate was 3.3%. So somewhere between 2.5 and 3.3%. Now, when you walked in the door, if I had asked you, what do you think the recidivism rate is? You might have said, I don't know, pretty high. 75%, I don't know, 90? No, it's actually very low. Most offenders do not reoffend. So what's the relationship between the offender and the person that they victimize? Mostly known to the person that they victimize. 60% acquaintance, 26% family member. So 86 to 90% known to the person that they victimize. Not strangers. There's some type of relationship. I don't know how you were raised, but I was raised to learn about the boogeyman, the scary person that I didn't know, the stranger. When come to find out, that person was not as likely to offend against me as someone I knew and probably knew well and trusted. What's the age of people victimized? Well, it looks pretty evenly distributed, doesn't it? 1/3, 1/3, one. Nope, it's actually not. People age 0 to 12 represent 34% of people victimized. People age 18 and over, 33%. And then there's that age range of 13 to 17 that represents a whole 33% of people victimized. Wow. 2/3 of people victimized are victimized under the age of 18. It's so important that we have this conversation, that we talk about safety with young people. And we have an expert here tonight, I'm really happy to report, from the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center, Jane Straub, and Jane will be up in a bit. So this is Max Jackson. He's the level 3 that has moved to Cottage Grove. He's 42, his physical description. He lives on the 8900 block of 92nd Street South. And no, we cannot provide you the specific address for safety reasons. We can give you the proximal address. And I'm sure that a lot of you here tonight live right in that area. And that's why you're here. His history is that he has adult convictions for promotion of prostitution and sexual contact with an adolescent and with an adult female victim. He has a juvenile adjudication for sexual contact with an adolescent female victim. He has a history of chemical abuse. So in 1989, in Hennepin County, he had a conviction for criminal sexual conduct in the 5th degree. He was 14. He touched another adolescent female, a peer age person. He was known to this person. He was known to everybody that he victimized. There was some type of relationship. So in this case, he was adjudicated delinquent. He was a juvenile. He received probation. Then in 1995, he was convicted, again in Hennepin County, of criminal sexual conduct in the 4th degree. This involved contact with an adult female victim. It included sexual touching. He used a weapon to gain compliance. It was a knife. And fortunately, the victim was able to get away before anything further happened. He was known to her. He received 1 year, 9 months prison, which was stayed, meaning he got probation. And then in 2001, Hennepin County, he has a conviction for solicitation, inducement, and promotion of prostitution. This involved prostituting a 17-year-old female. He was known to her. This time, the disposition was 11 years, 2 months in prison. Not stayed. He went to prison. And I need to tell you that in Minnesota, our sentencing requires 2/3 of the prison sentence spent in prison, and the last third in the community on supervised release. It's a good system of accountability. We can see if someone's doing well. If they're not, we can revoke them back to prison for a time, or we can strengthen their conditions of release that they need to live by. There's a process for it. He has additional criminal history for failure to register. He's got 3 convictions for that, and 1 for motor vehicle theft. Dakota, Ramsey, Hennepin. He did not go to prison for any of those. It's just part of his additional history. So in December of 2001, he entered prison. He was released in April of 2009 as a level 2. We assessed him as a level 2 at that time. He's come back to prison 3 times for supervision violations. Now, these are not new offenses. I want to be very clear about that. He was on very strict supervision and was not able to follow the rules of supervision. And when that happens, there's an investigation. We look at it, we say, okay, did the violation occur? What do we do? There are very strict protocol for what we do. Does he go back to prison? Can he stay in the community with stricter conditions? He went back to prison. The last time, and every time someone comes back to prison that has a risk level, we look at them to say, okay, do they need a new risk level assignment? Yes, no, yes, we decided he did. And when he was released in 2011, he was released as a level 3 based on his behavior on supervision, not because of a new offense, based on behavior. So he came out, as I say, December of 2011 as a level 3. His sentences ended in 2012, December 13th of 2012. He moved to Cottage Grove on the 23rd. So he's been in the community pretty much ever since his release from prison in 2011. He hasn't lived in this particular community, but he has not been in prison. He's not under correctional supervision. His sentence ended, as I said, in December of 2012. He is, however, required to register for life. So registration can be anywhere from 10 years to life. And he is one of the people who is subject to lifetime registration, meaning no matter what he does, he has to register his information with law enforcement. If he goes from here to Montana, he has to register with them. And Minnesota makes sure that he's gone there and registered with them. If he goes anywhere, if anything changes, he has to register that until the rest of his life, or throughout the rest of his life. So he's here. Law permits him to be here. He's transitioning from one place to another. You're probably going to see him. He can be out there doing what he needs to do, going to the grocery store, going wherever. Him going about his daily life is not suspicious in itself. He's not under supervision. He doesn't have conditions that say he can't be near children or anything like that. To live free from harassment. If he's harassed, the person harassing him may actually be breaking the law. You can assist in monitoring behaviors and activities, however, if it's appropriate. But I want to caution you to try not to focus on Mr. Jackson. I know that's difficult. We're able to be here tonight because Mr. Jackson's moved to Cottage Grove. However, he's the only person we can actually tell you about in Cottage Grove. There are 42 other people. There are other people that aren't even registered, that may be thinking about committing an offense, or maybe committing offenses over and over, but no one's told yet. We've seen how damaging that can be in the news lately, right? The most dangerous people are the ones that we don't know about. Not the level 3s, not the known people. So that's why I caution you to try not to focus on the level 3 that you know about. This is an opportunity for us to speak generally about safety and to learn, yes, about him. The person most at risk from Mr. Jackson is going to be someone that he knows, someone that he is in a relationship with. And I don't imagine that includes any of you. It might, but he needs to maintain the stability that he's created in his life since he's been out of prison. So continuing to have a stable home, a job, support at home, elsewhere, family, perhaps spiritually, etc. All those things are going to help him be more successful and not go back to prison for something. The longer he stays out, the more likely he is to stay out. Like I say, you can help. You're the eyes and ears of your community. That's why you're here tonight. Thank you. Keep your eyes and ears open. If you see something, say something. Trust your gut. Call law enforcement. If you see something, and not just Mr. Jackson, because like I said, it's him walking down the street or being near a school, that's not suspicious in itself. If you see anything that looks suspicious, people in themselves are not suspicious. Behaviors can be suspicious. So learning what behaviors might be suspicious. Someone walking down an alley might not be suspicious. Someone walking down an alley looking into cars or looking into garages, suspicious. So, by the way, you're the ambassadors too of your community. You didn't know that probably, but you're here tonight. Please take more of the handouts and bring them back to those who couldn't be here tonight. We're all crime fighters. There are those comic book mythical heroes, and then there's the real life hero. And it doesn't have to be Mrs. Kravitz, as I call her. It could be a man. This is not gender specific. We all know Mrs. Kravitz though, right? Some of us have even been Mrs. Kravitz. Mrs. Kravitz is the one that called my mother when I was walking across the ice when it still wasn't hard enough to do that. And when I got home with my pants legs wet, my mom knew where I'd been because of Mrs. Kravitz. We can all be Mrs. Kravitz or Mr. Kravitz. And if you don't know who Mrs. Kravitz is, come and see me afterwards, I'll explain. But like I say, if you see something, say something. Pick up the phone. Don't just be the bystander that goes, oh, it's none of my business, I don't want to have anything to do with it. Pick up the phone, call 911, let them investigate it. It's their job. Law enforcement can't be everywhere. That's why it's so helpful that you're the eyes and ears. You're the #1 partner in public safety here. They can respond, but they can't prevent crime necessarily. You can. You can partner with the police. There. So I am very pleased to introduce Jane Straub from the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center. There you go.
All right, thank you. Again, I want to just repeat what Sarah said. Thank you so much for being here. This is important. At the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center, we get invited to these quite often, and we try to come to the ones that we can come to, because this is a time to talk about prevention, and we have an audience that's ready to listen. We also talk about, we know that fear freezes people, so when we're talking to kids, we never want to use scare tactics. We want to make sure that we're giving people information, so when something happens, people can respond the way that we want them to do. So some of you, again, may be kind of feeling frozen with fear, and that's not what we want. We want to give you some education. So the time that I have with you, I'll be talking about prevention and how we work with families and children to keep kids safe, to keep communities safe. We know that every offender at one time in their life had not offended yet. And so our job is, how can we prevent this from happening in the first place? We have been talking about Mr. Jackson, and as Sarah said, we don't want to waste all of our energy right there. We understand that certainly there's going to be energy there with Mr. Jackson, but we want to spread it out, and we want to say, we want our whole community to be safe, and we want to have information that can save our kids. So today, again, we'll talk about some information that hopefully you can share, bring back. We have information out there if you need more. You can always call us at Jacob Wetterling Resource Center. We are always happy to take any calls that adults have concerning kids. So please don't ever feel like, I don't know if it's a big enough deal to call. I get calls all the time where people say, I'm not really sure who I should call or who I should talk to about this, but this is the situation. And every single time it's the appropriate call. So it is a kid's job to be a kid. As adults, we want to say, what can we do to create a world where kids can grow up safe? So we don't teach stranger danger at Jacob Wetterling Resource Center. One, because we know that fear freezes children, and the other thing is that we know children tend to be harmed by people that they know, people that they love, and people that they trust. And as parents, when we talk about it, we kind of use the phrase, the people that we invite through the front door. We want to be looking at everyone. We always talk about no one is above suspicion, right? And I'm going to look at your behavior, and if your behavior is concerning, I'm going to pay attention to it. We've learned, unfortunately, time after time, that just because you're a particular organization doesn't mean that that's necessarily free from offenders. Just because of your title or your position or your relationship to someone does not make you immune. So we have to say, you know what, I'm gonna look at everybody, and if you have behaviors that are concerning, I'm gonna call you on it. And that's really what we need to be doing. Again, when we look at the news, we see story after story of people that said, I just wasn't sure, so I didn't say anything. Or, excuse me, I didn't know who to tell. Or I just didn't think that person would be someone who would hurt kids. And so I think we do know better, and so that's what we're really planning to do. We give mixed messages to kids, especially Sarah talked about your gut instinct. Trust your gut, and we really want kids to trust their gut. There are two great books I would like to recommend. One is called The Gift of Fear. That is for adults. That's talking about how to trust your gut and how it's really, over time, become a really wonderful tool for humans. And the other book is called Protecting the Gift. And those are both by Gavin DeBecker. Protecting the Gift is for parents to talk about how to teach kids about that. And unfortunately, sometimes what we do is we minimize things that kids are trying to tell us. And so, just a couple examples, and you have probably, had this, where your kid comes up right after dinner and they're like, I'm hungry. And then you say, you're not hungry, you just ate. Or, I'm tired. How can you be tired? You just slept until noon. Or, I'm scared. And then we say, there's nothing to be scared of. And what we want to do is we want to explore those feelings that our kids are trying to express by saying things, well, tell me more about being scared. Right? We want to have a conversation instead of just shutting down when kids are starting to talk to us, because kids are looking for someone to talk to and someone to trust, and we want it to be us, or we want it to be people that we know are safe people. We want kids to know how to ask for help, so there's a lot of information on the internet. That's not where we want kids to go. Kids are very interested in body parts, right? They just are. And unfortunately, most kids don't go to WebMD when they're online, right? And so we have to be the one, if our kids do stumble upon something like pornography or someone's asking them, we want to know that they can come to us and it will be okay. I saw this online and I'm really confused, or I'm scared, or I don't know what it is. Most of the time, kids get scared and then they don't tell us. We want kids to know, you can always come to me with questions about your body, right? You can come to me with questions about anything. Right? Because unfortunately, there are people that are willing to talk to our kids, but we want it to be us. And again, children and teens more likely to be victimized by someone that they know and trust. So, we talk about safety rules as a family. We want families to have family safety night. Maybe that's 2 times a year. I do have some brochures out front, so please grab them. In the 11 for Jacob, there are 4 different brochures in there, and one is family safety night. We want you to talk about everything safety. How to call 911, what to do if there's a fire. What are the rules for someone picking you up at school? What are the rules if someone comes and says, something to you at the park? What are the rules for internet? So we want to go through so kids know what it is, and then we want to make sure that we're revisiting that time after time after time, because sometimes it takes a while to understand what the rule is. Like sometimes if a man comes to the park and they want you to help them look for a lost dog, we don't do that, right? And we think the kid knows, and then what happens is the kid goes with someone and then they're like, well, it wasn't a lost dog, Mom, it was a lost cat. Right? We didn't talk about that. So we have to revisit and make sure that kids understand what the rule is and why we have it. Not to scare them, but to give them information. And does this person give me an uh-oh feeling? Are they trying to get me to break the rules that I have with my family? And is it making me feel uncomfortable? And there are a lot of words that kids will use, scared, uncomfortable, uneasy, nervous, I have a stomach ache, right? And we really want to explore those feelings with kids. Tell me more about why you're feeling that way. Kids are looking for someone to say that they're special and that they're loved. And every kid should have those people in their lives that are not offenders or people looking to exploit children. So making sure that the kids in your life know that you care and know that you're there and understand that you notice them. It's very hard. Sarah talked about the ages between 14 and 17 that are victimized. I don't know if anybody in this room would want to go back and relive those years. I know I wouldn't. It's a difficult time anyway, so anything we can do to support our kids and let them know that we care and surround them with people who can answer their questions. I know sometimes kids don't feel comfortable coming to us, but is there an aunt? Is there, a neighbor? Is there a coach? Is there someone that our child really feels comfortable that they can discuss important things with? And how do I say no? It's okay to say no. We teach kids that they can say no to touches, they can say no to affection, that they have the right to say no even to an adult. And so it's really important that we're teaching our kids to say, is it okay if I hug you? Is it okay if I kiss you? Right? Is it okay? We want our kids to be asking permission, and we want our kids to be giving permission. Right? Again, that's some of the mixed messages of we make kids give forced attention and affection to people when they don't want to, and then they start to learn that it's not okay to say no to adults, or they don't get to say no. Right? And it's not that we want them to hurt grandma's feelings, right? I would really like you to hug grandma, but if you don't want to, I understand. Right? So we want to do that. How do I say no? And is it okay to say no? Who forms your net? I do have some tattoos out here. Feel free to bring them. They're temporary tattoos. We talk about every child should have 5 adults that form their safety net. And the reason we want 5 is because there's not one adult who can solve every problem. And sometimes we know with adolescents, they have that catastrophic thinking, right? It's either all or none, right? We talk about adolescents. It was the best day ever. It was the worst day ever, right? I love school. I hate school. Jane's my best friend. I'll never talk to Jane again. So we never want a youth to go to an adult and not get the answer that they need and then think, well, now nobody can help me. We want them to say, well, that person couldn't help me, but I'm going to go to another person, or I'm going to go to another person. We really want kids to be squeaky wheels when it comes to getting help. And the other reason we want it to be multiple people is the chances are it might be that person in their net that's hurting them. We teach kids that the adults and people in their life should be connectors. If you are ever with someone who's trying to disconnect you from the other people in your life, that is a red flag. People saying, I'm the only one that loves you, I'm the only one that understands you, that's when we want kids to say, nope, that's a lie, that's not true. I have a whole bunch of people in my life that care for me. And whether that's a friend, whether that's a boyfriend or girlfriend, whether that's somebody online that's starting to say those things and trying to disconnect them from other people, we want kids to recognize that. So again, I talked about family safety night. It's just doing it. It's normal. Put the phones away, order some pizza. Maybe there's a movie or, something. There's always something on the news, a movie where you can have a conversation. And I love to use wondering curiosities when something's on. I wonder why she decided to do that. Right? I wonder why he said that. And invite kids to have conversations about things going on. So we talk about body parts. We talk about the medically and anatomically correct body parts. We want kids to know what they are. It's no different than any other body part, except that we can say no to touches. Touches are never secret. We also talk about the difference between secrets and surprises. So if someone's trying to keep a secret and it's making us feel uncomfortable, we want to let someone know. Right? That birthday present for mom or dad or grandma is a surprise. That's very different than a secret. And this is uncomfortable. It doesn't have to be uncomfortable, right? If we start when kids are young and we talk about bodies and we talk about things, it doesn't need to be uncomfortable. This is where I disagree with the slide. So, and again, not one talk, but continuous little talks, right? Because we do want kids to come to us. We want kids to be safe. We want them to understand that they can talk to somebody, they can tell someone if something has happened. Even if they didn't say no or they were afraid to say no, it is never their fault. But what we really want to do is we want the community, we want other kids, we want people to recognize behaviors. It's very hard for survivors to come forward. As Sarah said, it's very courageous and it takes a lot of strength. We know that the reporting rates are very low for adult survivors and they're lower for kid survivors. We want the rest of the community to say, what's happening is not okay and I'm going to do something about it. And most importantly, we need to say, it's not okay to do that. We need to teach our kids that it's not okay. We need to teach our kids to listen to no and stop and take a break. Right? Nobody was raising it. The offenders that we have today have parents, right? There's no parent that was saying, I'm going to raise a sex offender, right? But we have to have a community and we have to have people that call people on their behavior and say, that's not okay. You know, we can't say, don't get raped. We have to say, no, don't do no harm. That's another message that we need to have. I think I talked about that. Okay, that is it for me. Thank you again for your time and attention. And if you have any questions about particular kids or questions, please call. We're happy to help you.
So some things to be aware of. Something we call the 390s. 90% of these people do not reoffend. 90% are known to the person that they victimize. And 90% have no previous convictions. And something we call the 2 R's. It's about relationships, not residency. It's about social proximity, not geographic proximity. Where someone lives has no bearing on their dangerousness. There's been extensive research done on this subject, both by the Department of Corrections and other government agencies across the country, and they have all found the same results. It's about social proximity. That's how people usually get access to people that they victimize. The online resources I mentioned at the beginning, please pick up that sheet if you haven't already. Take some time, go to these sites, get what you need from them. The 2 that I recommend the most often are Stop It Now and Jacob Wetterling Resource Center. We have excellent resources available. Locally, we have Jacob Wetterling Resource Center. You also have Canvas Health here. And we have Tara and Sadie here tonight from Canvas Health, your local victim resources.
So we provide services in Washington County out of our office in Oakdale. We provide hospital response for victims of sexual violence. We have a 24-hour crisis line. We also have a sexual assault support group. We provide 10 free sessions of counseling for victims, and then we also provide therapy, ongoing therapy for victims of sexual violence. So I supervise the program and provide the therapy, and then I have Sadie here with me tonight, who's our community educator, and she does a lot of work in Washington County. She is in Cottage Grove High School, so I'm gonna let her kind of tell you a little bit about what she does.
Yeah, so as a community educator, I guess I would just say invest in interest in your district's sex education program. Is it a comprehensive curriculum? Ask those questions. Is it a curriculum that is empowering kids and educating them where they don't have to seek information in through an unhealthy venue, and also to encourage integrated support services in your schools. So most schools in Washington County are contracting for mental health, chemical health support services. Where does sexual violence play a role in that? What kind of services can we push for in our schools along the lines of sexual violence for our youth and sexual exploitation and that education in schools? So ask those questions and put an invested interest in that as well.
Great, thank you. So you have a wonderful local resource. You may be leaving tonight, you may still be having some feelings. Excellent local resource. Give them a call. You may want them to come out and give a presentation to your group, whatever your group may be. It may be Girl Scouts, it may be whatever. Give them a call. Other online resources, the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, as I mentioned in the beginning, that's the state police agency that maintains the database of registered offenders. The public can look at that site. If you're looking for criminal history, you can look that up. You can also look up a list of people who are currently not compliant with registration requirements. We have a really good compliance rate in Minnesota, I'm happy to report, but you can look at that. Generally, when someone's not compliant, it's something pretty simple that can be fixed pretty easily. Then the Department of Corrections website has several areas that may be of interest. The research I showed you earlier, I showed you thumbnail sketches of the research. There's extensive research available on the DOC website. I encourage you to go to the website and look at the research. It really helps to understand an issue by reading the research. You can also look at something we call the offender locator. That's a way to look at whoever is currently in prison or under supervision by the Department of Corrections. And then there's the level 3 area, the public registrant search, the registrants that are subject to public dissemination of their information, aka level 3s. You can look at that site. You can look at Mr. Jackson, or you can leave all those fields blank, see all 380 in Minnesota communities. You can search by zip code, by county, by the name of the town, or by a specific name of the person. If you're wondering at some point, is Mr. Jackson still in Cottage Grove? You can look at that website and put in your zip code, put in his name, put in Cottage Grove. If he's not in Cottage Grove is not going to appear on that drop-down list unless there's another level 3 here.
So, I want to thank Sarah Husted, Department of Corrections, James Strout from the Jake Boiling Foundation. You guys did a great job.
And thank you to the Cottage Grove Police Department for having this